Hey there folks, Rel here. Today we'll be taking a look at the Lasher, which is an extremely misunderstood and painfully frustrating weapon to use in the wrong hands. The Lasher is a heavy assault weapon specific to the Vanu sovereignty, and it stands out as one of the strangest weapons in the game, not because it shoots glowing orbs of splash damage, but because it leaves you utterly helpless in a stand-up fight. But before I scare you too much, we're going to go over the specifics of what the weapon does and does not do, what it's meant for, and how to use it from both a single player's perspective and as part of a coordinated squad. Another thing I wanted to quickly mention before we get started is that the new animations look amazing, and they remind me of a cobra, just the way that it fans out when firing, and if you're aiming down sights it's just going to cross the bottom of the interface, which looks really nice. I was using Amarish Grasslands camo I think a lot in this footage, but I recently switched over to the California Sandy Scrub, and now the thing just looks like a Burmese python. So really great work, animators and modelers and whoever else was involved in its latest iteration. It looks very cool. Anywho, here's a breakdown of the weapon. The Lasher will cost 700 station cash or 1000 certs to unlock on your heavy assault, and it's filed away as a heavy weapon, so not an LMG, but it does still take up the primary weapon slot. The first shot from a Lasher will always be dead accurate. Subsequent shots will be relatively accurate as well, especially if you're not moving. And the cone of fire will shrink very quickly, almost immediately after letting off the trigger, as long as you're using it in bursts. It carries 75 rounds per magazine and 225 in reserve. It can equip an extended magazine as well, which will double the capacity, so you're going to be bumping it up to 150 rounds per magazine. As a side note, if you equip the additional ammo suit slot, you'll get another magazine using your current count. So if you have extended magazines on, you're going to get another 150 ammo opposed to another 75. Each round deals 150 damage and 75 splash damage in a small area. It faces some damage degradation over range, dropping down to 100 damage at 60 meters. The splash damage, however, will stay the same regardless of range. Also, the projectile is slightly larger than the standard bullet, and I'm talking very slight. The projectile's model actually looks bigger than the hitbox actually is. Getting back to the damage side of things, what's interesting is that the splash damage is also applied to your direct hits. So you're effectively doing 225 damage per shot if you hit the enemy dead on, or 175 damage at maximum range. Direct hits with the projectile are adjusted by hitbox multipliers, so you'll deal 2 times more damage for headshots, or only 90% damage to shots to the legs. The splash damage, however, is not affected by hitbox multipliers, and it will deal 75 bonus damage regardless of where the shot lands. This means that it's a 5-shot kill to the body and a 3-shot kill to the head. However, the splash damage is affected by FLAK armor, meaning that an enemy with rank 4 FLAK armor will take 6 shots to kill instead of 5. And to kill a target with splash damage alone, you're looking at a 14-shot kill range. The splash damage of the Lasher will also not deal damage to enemy explosive devices, only direct impacts will. So the bullet damage is good, the splash damage makes the weapon really unique, but what cripples the Lasher's ability to stand toe-to-toe with any normal primary weapon is that it has a ridiculously low rate of fire, which is 300 rounds per minute, and also the slowest projectile velocity in the game, traveling at just 100 meters per second. Now if you're in a firefight at point blank range, say you don't miss any shots at all, they land on an enemy's body, you'll kill him in 1 second flat, as the Lasher fires 5 shots a second. Compare that to something like the Orion, which fires 12.5 bullets per second and can kill an enemy in just 7 shots. So in the time that it takes you to kill a single person with the Lasher, the Orion can practically kill 2 people and do so accurately from much greater range. And this is why the Lasher is a heavy support weapon. It's not meant for killing because it sucks at it. It's meant for getting assists, for laying down suppressive fire, and for generally being a nuisance. It's currently the only infantry-based weapon that acts like this, and it is very situational. Before we go into some strategy and effective use, I want to mention the attachment options you have available. In practically all of the footage you'll be seeing me run extended magazines, and it's a solid option regardless of how you intend to play with the Lasher. But you'll also have access to a forward grip and a laser sight. The forward grip is practically useless. It will increase the equip time of your weapon. The Lasher also has little to no recoil, and the limiting factor is not the recoil, it's instead the damage output and the cone of fire expansion. So I don't suggest getting this attachment. It does next to nothing on the Lasher. Laser sight, on the other hand, can be very, very useful. Your first shot will always be 100% accurate if you're standing still and the cone of fire is reset, even without attachments, but the laser sight is going to slim down that cone of fire while you're moving or while you're jumping, and this is extremely useful if you find yourself going toe-to-toe with enemies very often. Alright, so now on to the good stuff. So how do we use the Lasher effectively from both a solo and a team-based perspective? I want to talk about using it on your lonesome first, because in order to be effective with the Lasher, even on a coordinated team-based level, you still need to know how to use your weapon. The first and most important thing about the Lasher is to abuse the crap out of cover. And I know it sounds obvious from the outset because cover is always a good thing, but remember that this weapon does splash damage, and there is strength in being able to be completely hidden from enemy fire while still dealing damage to them. In fact, this is the major draw of this weapon, and it is the one reason why it is very, very powerful when used correctly. You'll notice in a lot of footage that if I'm engaging someone and they close in on me, I'll turn the corner and keep softening them up with my splash damage. So when they finally do turn the corner of themselves, I'll be in the position to finish them off. Same thing goes for attacking as well as retreating. If I can soften them up on the way to them, then I'll have a better chance of finishing them off when I round the corner. So yeah, cover, learn it, use it, love it. Remember that the Lasher is a very accurate weapon, and while the projectile speed may be slow, that doesn't mean that you can't still inflict direct damage on your opponents, both up close and at range. Do try to burst your shots when you can. It's extremely easy to get carried away and just hold down the trigger, but it takes next to no time to reset your cone of fire after you let it go. Attacking from a high point is always a plus, because even if you don't hit the target, you'll still be dealing splash damage to them. Firing at enemies that are above you without a wall to their back or a ceiling above them is extremely difficult to do, as your shots will easily be avoided. Generally speaking, aiming for the feet is the smartest way to make sure you're going to inflict at least the splash damage, but it also doesn't deal a whole lot, only 75 a pop, so do not be afraid to shoot at people directly. The projectile speed is slow, so landing shots on moving targets, even at medium ranges, is pretty difficult, but for closer encounters I suggest aiming at the chest or at the legs. Aiming at the head allows for too much margin of error, and if you're aiming at the legs, even if you don't hit them directly, you will at least get some splash damage on them. Aiming at the head allows for too much margin of error, and if you're aiming at the legs, even if you don't hit them directly, you're still going to get that splash damage. Don't be afraid to test the waters. If you're not sure what's going on around a corner, you can always fire off a few shots to see if you get a hit marker or not. This is a great tool for avoiding enemies who are just sitting behind a corner waiting to ambush you. And the reverse is also true. You can sustain fire on an entryway or a corner so that enemies won't want to round it, because no one likes taking damage that they don't have to, and only an experienced player is going to know to run through the Lasher fire and take out the heavy that's laying on the trigger. So you should expect most other enemies to just stay back. Concussion grenades go well with the Lasher. You can use them as an escape mechanism, so if you're caught in the open, you can try to find some cover, or if you get the drop on a group of enemies, a concussive will incapacitate them long enough to dish out some nice AoE damage to the lot of them. In line with the concussive grenades bit is probably just to equip yourself properly. Now I'm using a beamer, yes the beamer, not the manicore, as a secondary, and that's so I have a spammable and accurate weapon over range. You want to supplement the weakness of your primary, which I feel is a lack of quality ranged capabilities. But that's going to definitely depend on which situations you find yourself in and how you use the weapon overall. If you need close quarter stopping power, then pull a revolver or a hard-hitting faction pistol. Also, flak armor is extremely useful if you want to dampen the damage you deal to yourself, because it's going to happen, it just does. If someone gets in your face, then you're going to be dealing damage to them and yourself. The last thing that I want to caution is to just watch your friendly fire. Now the Lasher has got to be the #1 cause of weapons lock. It's stupidly simple to splash allies with, and to that end, don't attack targets that your allies are next to. Let them deal with the situation or pull out your secondary, unless you know that they're going to be able to take the damage that you're throwing their way. It's a running joke, but it's a pretty serious issue. Firing on allies is really easy to do. So find proper placement where you can set up and provide suppressive fire for your teammates without nuking them in the process. When it comes down to squad play, things are a little bit different because you're not just roaming around, you have a role. First of all, I want to give a big thank you to the Sentinels on Waterson. They helped me get some Lasher teamplay footage, and a lot of them have never actually picked up a Lasher before, so it was fun and a pretty entertaining experience, at least for me. The biggest part of organized Lasher use is to have a proper situation, and that is something we definitely did not have in this footage, which is kind of unfortunate, but hopefully you'll still understand the power behind this weapon and behind the strategies involved. So as far as proper situations go, Lashers are great for fortifying defenses in locations with limited access, so biolabs immediately come to mind. If you have a Lasher crew spamming rounds at the choke points, enemies will have a very hard time getting through without at least taking substantial damage in the process. And that's the intention. You want to stack area of effect damage, thus creating an area of denial. Because, like we mentioned earlier, no one wants to take damage that they don't have to, so enemies are likely to look for a way around. And if you're on the receiving end, the only other option you have to deal with Lasher suppression is to charge through that field of hurt. And if enemies are going to make it to the other side, then there should be squad mates with regular weapons standing by to take out the stragglers. Because the Lasher is best used as a complement to standard weapons, it doesn't replace them. So you do still want to roll with engineers, with medics, and anything else in order to address all threats. And this is the big underlying concept behind Lasher use. Stack area of effect damage with sustained fire, and do it on the choke points. So we're talking teleporters, entrances to control points, elevator entrance and exit points, spawn rooms, and other high traffic footpaths. And the same as when you're soloing, the best positions are elevated ones where you can fire down on an enemy. It's the easiest and most accurate way to incur that splash damage while also keeping an eye on enemy movement. And that is about all I had on general Lasher strategy. One thing I would like to mention though is that if you are a newer player to either PlanetSide 2 or shooters in general, I do not recommend buying this weapon. It will only end up frustrating you and frustrating your teammates. I recommend Lashers for patient and experienced players who know how to avoid damaging teammates and have a firm grip on how to work infantry cover. Overall, the Lasher is a very niche weapon that allows a player to easily suppress enemy infantry, but at the cost of being able to defend yourself. It works best as a tool to support your allies from range, but can inflict damage on teammates due to its splash damage. If this video has been interesting or helpful, please feel free to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about the channel. And if you have any thoughts, footage, or success stories with the Lasher in action, please post a comment or a video response below. Thanks very much, folks. We're all signing off.